All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, known by many names and beyond all names. Blessed love and peace. I just, a minute ago, I recorded a joint. Um, the ambulance arrives comparatively expediently, and so thus there's less of a necessity of attending to the circumstances because there's already the professionals. So there's that. And thus I'm watering I'm sharing water with my housemates, some of my housemates, um, not visible from that side. And as I'm doing that, I'm reminded of something that's intended to be shared in the previous joint that I shared just a moment ago, actually 3 hours ago, that concludes a moment ago. It pertains to the initial topic of wanking and hoeing. What up? Did not give a warning for that. We were just jumping onto this joint. But that was the beginning topic for about an hour on the previous joint, wanking and hoeing. Rather than going into all the depths of that are just addressed a minute ago or an hour ago, this is what I'm intended to share um, from that, amidst that. The healing part of it, and like the realness of the healing part of it. I mentioned first the requirement of recognizing our own experience of not healthy, unhealthiness, and then to learn further about what healthiness is. And then when we have some proficient understanding of what healthiness is, then reviewing our experience at whatever moment that is and how we've gotten to that point, what our path is up to that point of influences, positive and negative, and how when we learn the healing, we naturally migrate closer towards that healing. And at the same time, there is the intentional migrating of the healing into where we exactly are at the moment, amidst our positive and negative influence. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is finding home, cultivating healthy home, literally, physically, fully healthy home. Now, it's legitimate, it's helpful, let me say it, let me tell it, but at the same time, it's comparatively generic, and many kinfolk need to like have some further details or further realness, because it's a tenacious thing to be enveloped in that experience of hoeing and wanking. So this is what is intended to be shared in addition to what I already shared. The first part of it is, again, to recognize that the healing and the ongoing healing is us within ourselves. Not to blame anyone for anything, and simply to look at what we are doing. What we're doing that leads us into these experiences of affliction and unhealthiness. What we are not doing to prevent these experiences of affliction and unhealthiness. When we recognize that there's behavior and influence of others that is unhelpful, or that is causing harm and unhealthiness, what are we doing? Why are we involved? What are we doing? Or why are we involved? Why do we continue in terms of interaction with such negative influences? What's the necessity? And there may be a necessity, but what is that? And then amidst a necessity, how can we minimize the negative that we experience amidst that? Whether it's taking a break for a while, whether it's reducing the regularity, or otherwise, talking about it, or whatever, if that's possible. But ultimately, the foundation is within ourselves. And that foundation of healthiness is exactly within ourselves. It's nobody else is doing, it's only ourselves. And nobody can touch it except for ourselves. Regardless of anything anybody else does, it is us. To live a fuller, well, let's not say a fuller life, but to continue in life and fulfilling our purpose in this life, there's usually the requirement of further interaction and involvement with life. So, whatever we cultivate within ourselves, eventually we have to balance that with whatever we experience outside of ourselves, interacting with others. And that's where the healthy home part of it comes in terms of having a healthy base outside of just our personal selves, a healthy foundation where we physically live, where we provide the sustenance that we require, the shelter, the supplies, the clothing, a foundation for a relationship between husband and wife, and additionally children and the next generation and further. I'm getting too specific here. God willing. All right. So, when we talk about the experience of wanking and hoeing and how to go from that into an experience of healthiness and thorough healthiness, day in and day out, year in and year out, generation in and generation out, being in relationship, marriage with someone else, after being entrenched in an experience of wanking and or hoeing. How is that done? Yes, we cultivate the sanctuary within ourselves, a knowledge of what is healthy, and do that to the utmost. But then how do we return into relationship with the rest of the world, society, and additionally, amidst the positive and negative influences? Here's consideration. And I'm articulating this because this is not a matter of comparison. It's not a matter of comparing ourselves to others. It's not a matter of downing anybody, putting anybody else down as the sake of feeling better or further secure about ourselves. That's not what this is. When we truly love ourselves, it is unnecessary to hate anyone. When we truly love ourselves, it is unnecessary to hate anyone. Anyone who has hate, anyone who has predatoriness, it's simply a matter of, well, I'm going to address predatoriness and hatred differently. Anybody who has hate, it's simply a matter of untangling that hate. Because true love of one's own self is truth, and understands that hate is enveloped in deception, self-deception. Anyone who hates somebody else is enveloped in deception. And so with true love, it's not a matter of burning that hate or smashing that hate or conquering that hate. It's a matter of untangling that hate and showing that hate the truth so that it unravels itself and explains itself. That's all that's necessary, ultimately and essentially. Truth. Whatever that hate is feeding off of, just be honest. And eventually, through that honesty, it's like, wait, hold up, yeah, that's silly. What's all that about? Yeah, nah, okay. I ain't got no reason for that. And if I did that, it's going to lead to that. So yeah, definitely not. True love untangles hate. So that's that. That's across ethnicity, race, religion, but also behavior too. In the condemnations concerning behavior, because it's a predatory evaluation of better than, worse than, and that applies to wanking and hoeing too. So that's something, again, when we have that understanding of what healthiness is and that security, then we become less concerned about what others think. We still have to deal with what others think, and it still influences our politics and diplomacy and other things, economics in this life, but we're less concerned about it. So that's part of the process of healing from wanking and hoeing. And when we talk about a healthy home, healthy village, we can and put this in the context, even in imagination, of just like a village of hoeing and of previous wankers and hoes. And that's I said in the other video that this is extremely crass and disrespectful language I'm using. I'm utilizing it for a particular reason. It's addressing a specific behavior, and it's accurate. Even amidst the chargedness, it's still an accurate terminology to utilize. It's not just a slur. So I'm using it in that respect, and as it differentiates from other types of similar slurs like harlot or prostitute or otherwise. So wanker is a wanker. I don't know how much people are going to go up in arms about that. No pun intended. But a village of previous wankers and hoes. And that might seem silly or humorous, whatever else, but just to think about the amount of like condemnation, the amount of like just vitriol or dispersion that others, outsiders, cast upon the residents of such a village. Just the prospect of such a venture of wankers and hoes trying to rehabilitate and live a normal life or whatever. That can be very stifling, very, very challenging. So, as I mentioned, the solution, the foundation of the solution exists within ourselves, and knowing what truth is and what healing is, and cultivating a solid foundation of that truth and healing. Now, as we venture into the forays of society and civilization and imperialism, and all the devaluations, valuations, and otherwise that exist within civilization, now we get into some of the nuances and mechanics of this navigation. And here's where we get into a little bit of what can be considered as devaluation or whatever else. But I am sharing this in the context of counterbalance. So, for those who have the rote tendency of devaluing sistren who have a history of being hoes, and for vitriol towards brethren who have a history of being wankers, and regardless of what people are doing now, still having that stigmatization of such. These are some countermeasures just to keep in mind to counterbalance that adamant, because there's no denying it. It is self-abuse, and there's a certain valid admonishment because it's not healthy, and so there's a certain admonishment about that behavior. But the continual devaluation and the extreme valuation, people take things to extreme and like are cutthroat about it. So to help in balancing those tactics and tendencies, here are some countermeasures. One of the things I talk about in terms of the wanker amongst men is again, recognizing men as being weak, as being pathetic or whatever else, not being able to pull women or whatever. I also describe the notion of a man, a wanker, being a slave, being enslaved, body, mind, heart, and spirit even. And so again, a devaluation of him as a man, as his own entity or whatever else. So when a wanker is being devalued because of that, then for when they're blah, 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 some of the considerations he may share or even just simply ponder to himself as a way of balancing that is to recognize that particularly in today's modern, postmodern world society and world imperialism, every man is a slave. 100%. Regardless of how much money he has, how many women he has, how big muscles he has, car, whatever credentials he has, how many ever language, whatever. If he is a citizen of any democracy, he is a slave. If he is holding money and depending upon that money with other men's faces on it, he is a slave. There are so many different ways that all the men of modern democracy are enslaved, that one pointing fingers and laughing at another is ludicrous. Particularly, well, anyone who's trying to devalue another is exemplifying a further entrenchment within enslavement. So it's not a matter of getting mad at that person or trying to like demean that person, but just to know, have peace of mind within oneself. Oh, you know, that's a slave, and they're trying to call me a slave, or they're trying to call me pathetic or whatever else. If they're rich and they're flexing their money, inheritance, education, elitism, credentials, again, anytime somebody is endeavoring to put somebody else down, demean somebody else, they are revealing their own insecurity. Superiority is an overcompensating inferiority complex. So that's the simple basics. And as it pertains to wanking, just understand, anybody who's going to be admonishing or condemning along those lines, just understand that criticism and admonishment is generated from an advanced experience of insecurity and enslavement. Similarly with the accusations of hoeing, same thing. Men and women who admonish women for previous experience or previous behavior of hoeing, that admonishment is coming from an experience of insecurity. Again, it is beneficial to admonish the behavior. Hoeing is unhealthy, and someone who is hoeing in a community it is beneficial to call that out, because that can affect other people's well-being in that community. Somebody who's a wanker is self-abusive and imposes an adverse influence on others within that community. So that behavior in itself is unhealthy, and there's a rightfulness in admonishing that behavior. When somebody is progressing from that behavior, that admonishment is then further ill-placed. It is less appropriate. It is less prudent. It is increasingly excessive, and thus predatory and devaluating. So when that is experienced, it's simply a matter of understanding the predatory tendencies of others, the enslaved nature of others, and again, the purpose is not to get mad or not to like point fingers at otherwise, but it's to have assurance of oneself, so that there's not just an absorption of the abuse, and understanding of the balance. When need be, if called upon or whatever, then there might be the voicing of the facts as it pertains to others. When things delve to that point, just to be aware that we're starting to get into that realm of reactionaryism and susceptible to the same tendencies of predatoriness and overcompensations ourselves. So as much as we can, keep our peace, focus on what our priorities are, and worry less about what others think or what others accuse or whatever else, because by and large, the vast many people, particularly those who are in the quote-unquote upper class, and particularly those who are in the lower and middle class who are vying to get into the upper class, are just trying to are crabs in a bucket, and are just trying to jump on anybody they can as the easiest targets to get over the barrel, because the truly transcendent, the true confidence of the world don't put anybody else down. And when it comes to behavior, yes, there's healthy behavior, there's unhealthy behavior, and it's appropriate and prudent to call out unhealthy behavior. Stigmatization and continuing admonishment of past behavior, that is comparatively imprudent, and that's where things become further contentious, continuous, contrived, cunty. Ooh-wee. Alright. So, that being said, process again, summary, 20 minutes, Wadi. Cultivating truth and peace within oneself, healing within oneself, um, migrating, and that's the fourth process of recognizing unhealthiness, studying what healthy is, applying the lessons of healthiness to one's pathway, and then migrating to the next experience, which is residing within healthy home and village, a physical environment that is healthy, optimally, comprehensively. And in the context of winking and hoeing, that concept being a village of people who previously are enveloped within winking and hoeing. And in doing such, being again availed to public scrutiny and stigmatization and condemnation, but in that third process of relating and ongoing relations with the rest of society, knowing that there's dirt and there's foibles on everybody to very severe degrees. And I mentioned just part of it. I talked about democracies. I talked about people of affluence who tend to be the ones that are most vocal in terms of admonishments. We can talk about monarchies. We can talk about people who are not involved in democracies. But the smaller, the people who are not involved in democracies and who are communicating vitriol towards others, small number on this earth, and generally exist within a very homogenistic type of context. So people in such an environment speaking about anything outside of their own circle are out of pocket, out of their lane. So that in and of itself, even when being the hereditary monarch of a millennia long lineage of monarchs, beautiful, hallelujah. But speaking condemningly towards somebody outside of that immediate realm is out of the lane. And that's actually with due respect and due love and support for monarchies. We need this in this world. We need traditional families and that sovereign mindset in this world. Amidst the proliferation of secularism and world democracy, we need monarchies. But just recognizing the appropriateness of monarchies being honest and humble, and prudent, and monarchies already know that, to be honest. I'm speaking of some like new Yankee, speaking about the ancients of monarchs. Monarchs are already thoroughly trained in knowing the heaviness of words and criticism. So that's some of what we share at this moment. And again, peace and blessings to all.